Hello and welcome to the ValEUs podcast. This podcast is part of the ValEUs project, the Jean Monnet Policy Network, titled ValEUs, Research and Education Network on Contestations to EU Foreign Policy. It's founded from the Erasmus Plus program of the European Commission for a 3-year period starting from January 2024. This ambitious project involving 20 partner institutions from 17 countries across 5 continents focuses on scrutinizing the foreign policy of the European Union and the challenges posed to its values. This particular episode explores whether the EU generally lives up to the values it champions through the lens of one of Europe's most complex post-conflict states. And with us today, a very charismatic and smart scholar from Bosnia and Herzegovina, Nina Sajić. Hello, Nina. Great to see you.
Hello, David. Really good to see you, and hello to all the members of the ValEUs Consortium and other viewers of this podcast.
Thank you, Nina. Nina brings a rare dual perspective, the insider experience of a career diplomat and the critical rigor of a scholar who studies federalism, dependency, and identity. The conversation connects directly to the core values mission of examining EU foreign policy against its normative standards. So let's begin. Nina, you've been a diplomat, an ambassador, and now an academic. You've sat on both sides of the table with the EU. What made you shift your focus toward research, and what questions kept nagging at you from your diplomatic years?
Well, thank you, David, for this rather personal question, and thank you for deciding to open up this podcast in a bit different way than with other participants. It's true that I had a chance to sit on both sides of the table, but for me, it has never been a clear shift or a clear cut, if you like, because I've always had some sort of interest in this academic research world. I've been, I don't know whether to say blessed or cursed, to be able to see the international relations firsthand from the very early stage. I started to work as an interpreter for the United Nations mission in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I was only 18 then, so that was like a century ago. We didn't even have the title of interpreter. We were called language assistants, whatever that means. So from the very early stage, I could see that there are certain things that I would really like to explore more, not only in the practical, but also in the theoretical sense. I wanted to know more why certain societies, why certain countries, why certain institutional arrangements can be successful, especially if we are talking about conflict or post-conflict societies, and why, on the other hand, other arrangements fail. So that's where this question brought me to do my first MA in France, and then to do my PhD in the UK in federalism. So even though I was had a chance later on in my life to join the diplomatic world, and again at the very early age or really early stage to have certain high up functions as a foreign policy advisor, etc. I always wanted to explore this academic world. So the questions of why Bosnia and Herzegovina is composed the way it is composed, why there's so much misunderstanding or not enough understanding, both from Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also from the external actors, became a part of my research path. And then I simply decided that maybe it's time for me, maybe that I have gained enough practical knowledge, and maybe it's time for me to join the academia and to try to connect both worlds, the practice and the theory. So I don't know if I'm successful at this moment in doing that. Maybe we should ask my students, but I think that I can bring to them something that they cannot learn from the books, and that is some inside information, such as, voting system at the UNESCO, or when the Palestine became a member, full-fledged member of UNESCO, how did certain countries vote and why? So, I can give them some inside information.
Completely agree. Shows that they benefit a lot from your background knowledge, which is not always offered in academia. For some reason, all of the podcasts that I've conducted for ValEUs are related to my research. And
That's
this
why you are doing the
uh,
podcast.
and this one is not an exception. I devoted
Yeah,
6 years of my life to study in Bosnia and
yeah.
Herzegovina.
Yeah, I know.
So,
That's why it's really a pleasure to have a chance to talk to you,
yeah.
because you are not a complete stranger to the country. I mean, most of our partners know a little bit about Balkans, if not a lot, and they know a lot about Bosnia and Herzegovina, but you especially, because you have conducted a lot of research on the country, and you, as far as I remember, you've also visited the country. You stayed here for a
Multiple
couple of
times,
months.
yes.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. I really love Sarajevo.
Mm.
Although I have not been to northern Bosnia, and I will make sure to visit you as well.
You have to come. The door is open. An invitation, has been given to you when we were in Astana.
Yeah.
So you should definitely come to Banja Luka.
Thank you. So Bosnia and Herzegovina is a country that often appears in EU discussions, but as you've just mentioned, it's rarely truly understood. How do you usually explain its political complexity to someone hearing about it for the first time?
Yeah, especially it depends to whom we speak. If we speak like with people who have some academic background, it's much easier for them to understand. But for a person that is coming from a completely different world, sometimes we do have problems in explaining, and I try to do it as simple as possible. I say that Bosnia and Herzegovina, you even have certain people who are saying not complex, but complicated, which is even worse. And the complexity of Bosnia and Herzegovina doesn't come just simply because we like complex things. It comes from the fact that all the institutional arrangements, the institutional design, its federal architecture are actually result and are shaped by the war, by peacemaking, by the need to balance, if you like, different peoples, different interests, fears, constitutional claims, and different vision of the future of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So that's why sometimes for people coming from the outside, it is difficult to understand Bosnia and Herzegovina. The first thing that they see is this complex country that doesn't function, or that is inefficient, or that has a deadlock. But that would be the oversimplification of the situation and of the country. We are talking about the country that is completely different from what normally we think of a nation state in the Western way of thinking, or in the European way of thinking. So Bosnia and Herzegovina, normally I compare it with Belgium, because there are so many similarities with Bosnia and Herzegovina and Belgium. Here, there is no one single idea of the state. People have different ideas of what Bosnia and Herzegovina is. So some people say, for example, one constituent group wants the country to be federalized. Other constituent group are talking about confederation. The third constituent group is talking about central civic state. So these are their desires of how the country should look like, where in reality, Bosnia and Herzegovina is a typical example of federal country where you have a clear division of powers between several levels of governance, you have a central level, and you have a sort of an asymmetric federation. You have one entity, which is more or the federated unit, which is more centralized, the one that I live in, Republika Srpska, and then you have what they call the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is a federated unit itself that is more decentralized with 10 cantons. So here we have in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have a different understanding of legitimacy. We have different collective identities. So we have strong, for example, Croat identity, Bosniak identity, Serb identity, and we have different expectation of of what the country is supposed to be. So you have to begin with the fact that this is a clearly plural and sensitive constitutional space, and that probably one of the few things that peoples of Bosnia and Herzegovina agree upon is the integration into the European Union. But how to get there is not something that they agree upon easily. So this is the reality of the situation. I have to say that the country is divided along the ethnic lines, it's divided along the religious lines, and it's divided along the linguistic lines, if you like. Attempt to create one collective Bosnian identity have been tried before, even during the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but that has failed. And any pressure to create that in the sense of, French identity is going to have a strong opposition, at least by the two groups of people.
Well, as you mentioned, people in Bosnia have have different political opinions, and it's something that struck me the most in Bosnia and Herzegovina. People are general life, ordinary life in Bosnia is so politicized. People have an opinion about everything, and they're rooted in it's rooted in ideology, in deep ideology. So I would ask a young guy, and he would tell me that he is an anarcho-syndicalist. Another one is a communist. Someone else is anti-fascist. People have ideology deep inside. And in my research, I try to understand why some people are anti-fascist, and I try to explain it through the lens of Office of the High Representative, which is also something that may be completely unfamiliar for an outsider, which adds a lot to the complexity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So my next question is about this office. So, in your recent research, you argued that decades of international oversight through the Office of the High Representative have fostered a culture of dependency in Bosnia. So, can you walk us through this argument and as well as through this idea of the Office of High Representative?
Yes, thank you, David. You've been, it's. I remember people here talk about politics, not only internal politics, but about international politics everywhere, and regardless of their background, because it affects daily lives of ordinary people to a more extent than daily lives of a Frenchman or an American man, with the exception of what's going on in Iran at the moment. But we have been under so much external exposure that we do care what is going on outside, but also inside of the country. So, like you said, people have opinions almost about every single thing in the country, regardless of their educational or professional background. And mostly they talk about this in cafes and restaurants. The Office of the High Representative is, again, one of the particularities of the country. So we have this federal system that was made back in almost 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, in 1995, to end the war, and on top of it, Bosnia and Herzegovina was given international supervision, but not in a classical term of international supervision that we have seen in the past. It is something that is more closely related to what they used to have in United Nations, like tutorship, like supervision, not only to supervise the implementation of the peace agreement, but also to impose certain laws. And now we have a huge dispute whether this office could have ever take this responsibility, because it was never written something like that in the Dayton Peace Agreement, because literally, especially at the very early stage of international supervision by the Office of the High Representatives, High Representative would simply fire democratically elected representative at various levels of the governance. They could fire people working in the civil servants, in public sector. So there are so many literature already written about whether these powers, they call them bond powers. It was given, the name was given because the conference was taking place in Bonn in Germany. So these bond powers are very contested, not only internally, but also through academic literature and also through Venice Commission and other international bodies. So regardless of whether they were supposed to be given or not, these long-lasting supervision has created something that is known in the literature as the culture of dependence, and this is what your question was all about. It is what, and I'm not the one who invented the term. You can find it in the literature. It simply means that long periods of the outside supervision, especially of a very strong supervision that we've had in Bosnia and Herzegovina, can change political behavior, not only institution, but behavior of politicians, individuals. So if the local actors, so if local stakeholders here in Bosnia and Herzegovina know that at the end of the day, there is someone or somebody, there is an authority that may intervene or that may impose or that may correct, sanction, pressure, or whatever terms we may use here, then the incentives of developing a real, genuine internal compromise or political cultures become very, very weak. So over the time, this sort of international supervision, some people even call it a colonial way of authority or post-colonial authority. Anyways, this kind of supervision creates a political culture in which local actors, local stakeholders stop to behave as though they have the responsibility, as though the domestic arena is the final arena where everything is going to be decided. So they lose. The problem also is that external actors that do have a lot of say in Bosnia and Herzegovina do not have accountability, or they are accountable to nobody. They can go home easily and continue with their lives, as we've had a case in the past. On the other hand, political actors or officially elected politicians are responsible. They are responsible to local to their voter. So this kind of culture of dependency is obviously not a good place or not a good basis for developing or having democracy. And our institutions have remained, even though new institutions were created 30 years ago, they have remained very immature, if you like, because they have never taken a full local ownership of the country. And that's why I talk about culture of dependency in that way.
You know, from the perspective of participants of my study, uh, local elites in Bosnia and Herzegovina are happy about this system and they don't even want to challenge it because all of them benefit and they benefit from these ethnic boundaries within the country. They know that their constituencies would continue voting for them, they would benefit from the system, and they don't want to challenge it.
I could hear that argument by some people, but I know how I feel. I think that if I am to be elected for a certain position, I want to have a full responsibility, and I want to have to have a full ownership of what I'm doing. I know that in this interconnected world, even if you are completely sovereign, if a country is completely sovereign, it depends a lot on many other issues. But we are talking here about very local, dimensional issues that sometimes political leaders cannot decide, and it's not only about that, it's about who is on the negotiating table. I'm not saying that I worked for international organization and I know what we've had at the beginning after the war. We had three different sides who didn't even want to talk to each other. I remember we had a situation just after the war. For the viewers of this podcast, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, all people speak the same language, but we call them differently. And it's according to the Dayton Peace Agreement, every ethnic or nation has a right to its own language. And it's something that we need to respect. But in the reality of the situation is that we can completely understand each other, almost every single thing, more than Americans would understand an Englishman. But after the war, we had people who fought against each other. And for example, in one place not far away from Banja Luka, the city was divided between Croats and Bosniaks. So we had one minister of interior who was a Bosniak and his deputy was a Croat. So they wouldn't talk to each other without the interpreter, even though they completely understood each other. So this was the situation just after the war. Things are not like that in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We are past that long time ago. So international actors did play a very important role in bringing all the sides to the same table. What they failed to do was to step out, not to sit on that negotiating table any longer. They were supposed to withdraw many years ago for this political culture to develop among the three ethnic groups. And that momentum was missed. I'm not saying that still the political culture or the culture of political dialogue cannot be created, but I'm just saying that we have wasted a lot of time and years with this very, very strong international presence.
Hmm. The Values Project asks whether the EU actually lives up to its own values. From what you've observed, both as a diplomat and a researcher, where do you see the biggest gap between what the EU promises and what it delivers, what it actually delivers in the Western Balkans?
Well, we could have a podcast only on the EU and the Western Balkan integration, and we could have at least a couple of them because this is a very important and very frustrating topic, especially if you come from the Western Balkans. for many of us, the problem is a gap, like you said, a gap between the EU's language and its political behavior. In other words, when we talk about the European Union, we talk about the values, and this is something that we have been working a lot from various perspectives in our project. So we talk about democracy, we talk about equality, solidarity, rule of law, and of course, it's very important for all the societies, not only the Western Balkans, but for all society, at least on the European soil. But in practice, especially in the Western Balkans, the European Union has often acted less like a community of principles and values, but more like a manager of instability, if you like. I'm not saying that the European Union is insincere, that it doesn't mean that it wants the Western Balkan as a part of its family. But sometimes the action of the European Union are shaped by geopolitical realities, short-term calculations. We even had one commissioner, it was, I think, from the last commission, who said that the European enlargement is more than ever a geopolitical reality rather than the merit-based. So as far as we know, the next members of the European Union will most likely be Montenegro and Albania. Then we heard from various European officials unofficially that after them, maybe Ukraine and Moldova will join the European Union. And then for Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia, we have no clear signs, not to mention North Macedonia. So I'm not saying that these countries should not be a member of the European Union. I think that all the countries that I named, including Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, and the North Macedonia, should have, joined the European Union a long time ago. But the enlargement, it looks for us, is no longer merit-based, and this is something that is very frustrating, especially for us. For example, Bosnia and Herzegovina has done quite a lot on the European path. I remember I was working at that time in the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example, in 2008. And I remember that we've had our progress report on Bosnia and Herzegovina and Montenegro. In some aspects, Bosnia and Herzegovina was doing better than Montenegro. However, Bosnia and Herzegovina was not allowed to submit its application for the candidacy because of the High Representative. And that is one of the reasons why I am for the closure of this international supervision. Later on, they changed that, but in 2008, we were not allowed to do so. And we have lost a momentum. We have lost a momentum on the reform process because there was this really, really huge support for the European Union integration, not only among the citizens or the youth, but also among those working in these institutions. So that is sometimes where we see the gap is, and sometimes we also feel that what we are told officially and what some European Union officials say unofficially behind the closed door are completely two different realities. We hear, that European Union wants to first do internal reforms before it can absorb new members and things like that. So I still believe that the European Union is the most beautiful, if you like, project on the European soil. But whether the Western country will join the European Union one day, that is that we are yet to see.
Thank you, Nina. I believe we could stop on this good note, looking ahead of us and hoping. And hope, of course, was in my research all over the place. Hope for the better future for Bosnia and
Yes,
Herzegovina, and I
that's true.
hope too. Thank you very much for your time,
Mhm.
for joining us today. I believe our viewers would love this podcast. Thanks a lot.